So welcome back everyone. So this is your week 7 lecture of Intro to Academic Writing, and we're going to be looking at 4 things today. We're going to be looking at thesis statements, we're going to be looking at writing introductions, body paragraphs and conclusions, and we're going to be looking in part 3 at essay 1 and feedback, and in part 4 an introduction to referencing. Okay, so let's start by looking at thesis statements, which is basically, as it says in the box below, your main point or claim, or basically the overarching argument of your essay. So, at university, essay assignments and exams play a prominent role as assessment tools. University essay tasks are developed from set questions that give students a period of time to research a topic and produce their answer with references to their sources of information. Exams test students' understanding in a set period of time, usually 1 to 3 hours. Using evidence, this essay will argue that essay assignments are more beneficial than exams as an assessment tool because they are less stressful and result in improved student learning. So this is just a really brief synopsis of I suppose an introduction, but mainly what the purpose of an essay is. An essay, there are lots of different forms of writing that you will end up doing at university, but an essay is one of the most common. And it's a really clear way for us to get a sense of what you know about a particular subject. Um, so basically, it's about showing off what you know in that instance. So, according to UNSW, a thesis statement is a clear and direct answer to the essay question. It's a claim that can be discussed and expanded further in the body of your essay, and it's 1 or 2 complete sentences and part of the introduction. So, typically, what I would suggest that you do is put your thesis statement at the end of your introduction. Of course, your whole introduction should have a really clear sense of argument. Um, but I think that that last stepping off point is a really clear, valuable part of your essay to make really directed. It needs to be clear. And I think the key is to make it, it covers a broad range of information, but it needs to be very straight to the point as well. So if you can achieve all of those things, then you've got a good thesis statement that's going to guide the argument of your entire essay. So, according to UWA, a statement of the position you will argue for in your essay is basically a thesis statement as well. So, it's what position you're actually taking on the topic. The main thesis is one sentence in the introduction that provides a clear statement of the purpose or argument of your essay. The main thesis restates the assignment topic in active terms. Every paragraph that follows will refer back to and support the main thesis. To be honest, the topic here says it often starts with the words this essay will. Can I actually encourage you not to use that kind of stock standard phrase? Just because I think it's self evident what your essay is doing because you're already writing it. So I don't think you need to lean on these sorts of stock phrases. I think it's perfectly fine for you to figure out for yourself what your essay is going to do. So in this particular definition, it states that the thesis statement should be one sentence. Really, one sentence, 2 sentences, they're both fine. I think it just needs to come primarily at the end of your introduction. But of course, the whole of your introduction is going to give me a really clear direction of where your essay is going. So, another definition for you, the thesis statement is the sentence that tells the main idea of the whole essay. It can be compared to a topic sentence, which gives the main idea of a paragraph. It usually comes at or near the end of the introductory paragraph. So you can see that there is quite a degree of consistency amongst all of these definitions. So, writing introductions. Let's go through what the purpose of an introduction is. Imagine an essay without an introduction. What would it be lacking? And what should an introduction do? What should it include? Okay, so an introduction catches the reader's interest. It presents the general topic of the essay. It provides background information about the topic. It states the main points or the thesis statement of the essay. And an introduction usually starts with general information about the topic and finishes with specific information. So generally, as you can see by the diagram at the bottom, an introduction moves from general to specific ideas, which is typically why your thesis statement is positioned at the end of an introduction. Um, it is a general sort of, presents the general topic of the essay. It provides background information. What it also does is to present the main the kind of sub ideas that you're going to be talking about in the body of your paragraph. So if you have three body paragraphs, looking at three ideas will be a really good guide to your marker. Okay, so here we have another diagrammatical representation of the same thing. So the introduction, brief background or contextual information, focus your attention on a central theme, give me your thesis statement, and then a sort of structure of the essay. But again, here you can see that the thesis statement is the second last piece. My personal writing practice is to have the thesis as the last thing in the introduction. But remember that none of these structures are particularly hard and fast. It's about understanding the purpose of what an introduction is, and then kind of as you become a stronger writer, just riffing on that idea so that you can make it more of your own. Okay, so here what we've got is a sample introduction. So Cinderella is the story of a girl who lives under the rule of her evil stepfamily. She eventually overcomes them and lives happily ever after. She does this by dazzling the prince, even though many other girls try to woo him. What sets her apart is the most beautiful dress. Because the dress glows in the dark, the prince notices Cinderella. Okay. Um, so let's go through this as a kind of model introduction. So it's starting from broad and moving to quite specific. So the first thing I'll point out is that this is by no means a perfect introduction, and I'll talk about that as we go through the introduction. So Cinderella is the story of a girl who lives under the rule of her evil stepfamily. So if you're looking at an article in psychology or in engineering or in law, basically what you want to do is to start out with a broad understanding of what this topic is about, what this article is about, um, but then to give a kind of direction in terms of your argument at the same time. That would be a good rule of thumb to starting off your introduction. She eventually overcomes them and lives happily ever after. She does this by dazzling the prince. So you can see that as we move through the introduction, there are key specific things that are talked about that are quite specific. And I would anticipate as a marker that as I read the body paragraphs, I would read more about these specific elements that hold up the whole thesis statement. So I would learn more about dazzling the prince. I would learn more about, other girls try to woo him. So those are the sorts of things that I would learn more about. Um, with the thesis statement, I would just point out at this stage, it's probably not best practice to put a quote in your introduction. Or to have a quote as a complete sentence. Quotes are generally introduced as an organic part of your sentence. But basically, what this introduction is trying to demonstrate is that right at the end, this is quite a specific statement. So, because the dress glows in the dark, the prince notices Cinderella. So, it's quite specific as opposed to the broad statement at the beginning. So, let's have a discussion about writing body paragraphs. So, a body paragraph includes a topic sentence, supporting sentences, and a concluding sentence. Now, having marked and returned the first essay, lots of my comments for my tutorials were based around these sorts of areas of body paragraphs. I personally was really impressed with the first essay that you guys handed in, so well done to everyone on that. It's very challenging to write an essay, particularly if you're someone who's writing it for the first time. But one tip I can give you is that if you want to score more highly for your essays, really look at the structure of your work. Your topic sentence and your concluding sentences need to reflect each other. Um, I think it's good practice if they're not too similar in their wording. I think you need to show that you have such a broad understanding of language then that you can write these similar ideas differently. But your topic and concluding sentence need to reflect each other because remember, if we go back to the main principle of one body paragraph equals one main idea, that main idea needs to be really self evident in your paragraph. So, really, as part of your editing process, I would strongly recommend that you go through and just eyeball topic and concluding sentences and make sure they reflect each other. Your supporting sentences just explain and illustrate, give evidence for the thing that you're talking about. So there might be quotes, there might be explanations, there might be details, things of that nature. So writing conclusions. So what's the purpose of a conclusion? Imagine an essay without a conclusion. What would it be lacking? And what should a conclusion do? What should it include? Okay, to be honest, I'm going to go through these main points here, but if I can put the conclusion in really simple terms for you, a conclusion is very, very similar to an introduction. It's just that in an introduction, you're setting up what your argument is going to be, and in your conclusion, you've already done it. You're rounding off what it is you spoke about. Your conclusion generally is shorter than your introduction. Um, as your marker goes through and marks your work, they're making judgments about the quality of your writing and the quality of your research as they move through your essay. So when you get to the conclusion, not a lot is going to change. But what you do want to do is to maintain the quality of your writing and to be really consistent about what the argument is. So if you arrive at the conclusion and you're talking about something completely different to what you were talking about in the body paragraphs, then you will lose marks for that. So what I would suggest you do is just make sure that it's really consistent. So here it says that you summarize the main points of the essay in the conclusion, you restate the thesis statement, you make a final comment about the essay's main idea, and it doesn't introduce new ideas, and you certainly don't have any quotes in your conclusion. So what's the relationship between the two? How are they similar? How are they different? So I've touched on this already. So your introduction is generally a little bit fuller um, because you're setting up what your argument is going to be, and it's the first impression that a marker has of your writing and your scholarship. Your conclusion is generally brief, not too brief, but remember that it doesn't have to be as detailed as your introduction because you've already established so much. Um, I often use the example of my PhD thesis in illustrating what the relationship is between introductions and conclusions. So when I wrote my PhD, um, a PhD is a piece of research um, that takes years to produce. So it's 100,000 words long. And to give you an idea of where my introduction and conclusion sat within that, my introduction was about 10,000 words long. And I put a lot of effort into rewriting. I think I rewrote it about 9 or 10 times to really get the introduction right and to make sure that it sat with the rest of my work. My conclusion, though, was 2 pages. because I'd already set up and argued everything that I needed to in my PhD thesis. Really, it was just maintaining the quality and rounding off what I wanted to say. And I would suggest, even though an essay is much, much shorter, that you use those same principles. So, your essay one, some general feedback here. What did many students do well? I think generally paragraphing structure was okay. I think essay structure was okay. I think I wrote on many people's work that there was a good, reasonable sense of essay structure. You did what was asked of you. And some students wrote and rewrote their sentences, and that approach really paid off. I think students who edited their work quite intensively generally scored a bit more highly. Um, Students also had a clear essay plan. I thought a lot of the essay plans were really good. I think they walked a really good line between, basically being detailed and not detailed enough. I think generally they were very good. Areas for improvement. So a few students did include new material in their conclusions or quotes or things like that. So I would tell you to avoid that next time. Small errors can definitely be eliminated by rewriting your work. So this is really, and I made a lot of comments about editing on this. So really take some time to edit your work. I know that there were some students that I spoke to who thought that they might. In future leave more time to actually edit their work, which I think is really good. It's always a really difficult ask when you're finishing your essay at the last moment and you just don't have time to rewrite it, because you're missing out on really easy marks. Some students included more than one sentence in a sentence. This, to be honest, over my experience teaching on Introduction to Academic Writing, this is something that comes up time and again. The difference between a full stop and a comma is really key. And it's actually quite a difficult one to teach if you have missed out on that somewhere in your education. But I would uh, counsel many of you to really think about what the difference is between a full stop and a comma, because it makes a massive difference to the quality of your writing. Um, Read things online about that. There are lots of different websites that can help you, but it's a really common issue. And it's one that I want to try really hard to eradicate before you go into your degree. Some students wrote sentence fragments as well, and this is also a really common issue. Knowing what a full sentence is really key. So try and have a look at the comments that your tutor has made on your essay. If there are any issues along these lines, then try and pick them up and do what you can. Um, and remember as well that when you are writing, you should be reading as well. Reading and writing go hand in hand. So, to be a good writer, you need to be a pretty good reader as well. And that can be reading lots of different things. Obviously, you're reading the Dweck article, but you could be reading other things alongside that and really looking at how they construct something. But remember that we live in a day and age of the internet, and there are lots of resources online to help you as well. Okay, so when describing, some student sentences were very similar to the original, and you need to use your own words. So I know, excuse me, I know I made this comment a reasonable number of times. Um, you need to, and to be fair to everyone, there were lots and lots of students, the overwhelming majority were able to find their own words. But remember, do not lean too heavily on the original. We're going to be talking a lot about academic integrity and plagiarism and what happens if you write things that are too similar to someone else's work. Because remember that the whole point of university research is that people are writing things all the time that push the boundaries of what we think we know about particular topics. So if you come along and you just write what they've written, you're not actually contributing to that research in any way. And the thing is, academics take years and years and years to try and generate those contributions to scholarships, they get really annoyed if people just rip them off because it's not really what we're about at universities. So please bear that in mind, and we'll be talking about that over the coming weeks. Some students could be clearer about where the information is coming from. So some students actually didn't mention Dweck's article in the introduction. Remember that what we're trying to do is to set you up for your own research at university. So if you're doing something like psychology, for instance, and your first year lecturer says, right, you need to go and research this particular topic, um, you need to go to the library and find a bunch of articles on a particular topic. Um, you need to tell us which article you're referring to because we don't know which one that is because you could have gone to any one of thousands of articles. So please get into the habit of telling me in the introduction the title of the article, who wrote it, so that I have some sense of where you're going with it all. How to refer to the article, sorry, the author of the article. This is something that's a common sort of starting out issue with essays. So the first time you refer to the author, it's Carol Dweck. And then from then on, it's just Dweck or she or the author would be fine as well. So make sure that you get into that habit. That's a really common thing. So the full name right at the beginning and then just the surname from there on in. The thing that I would point out to you is try not to use her surname. Okay, so here's your 10-minute grammar point. Um, some cars have four-wheel drives. They are safer on icy roads. So um, incorrect sentence structure. This is a run-on sentence. It is actually two separate sentences. So this comes back to what I was talking about with the difference between a comma and a full stop. Because here, some cars have four-wheel drive. They are safer on icy roads. This is two sentences. Um, so that's a really, as I said to you earlier, this is probably one of the most challenging things to teach if you haven't been taught this previously. But I would suggest that you just go over a bunch of these and really test yourself on how this structure works. At the bottom of this slide, sentences. So, what is a run on sentence? Sentences that are joined together as one when really they ought to be written as two sentences or sometimes even three. I come across that quite a lot too. So here are some run-on sentences that you can look at correcting. Distance students, I would actually suggest that you pause the slide here and have a go at actually writing these out. I would encourage you to actually talk about these on discussion boards. I think that that would probably be really helpful because these are such a challenging part of what we do. Um, so really think about these and the way in which you can actually correct some of these issues because they will correct your own work also. Okay. Sentence fragments is the other point that I talked about earlier. So sentence fragments are incomplete sentences. Often they are part of sentences that you may have separated from the main sentence and they are easy to correct. So let's have a look at one. For example, governments make mistakes before and during, governments made mistakes before and during the crisis, such as the cronyism and inconsistent policies in dealing with the crisis. So the fragment is actually in blue. So this is another really, really common thing that I see. That should actually be a comma. Because such as is a kind of joining phrase. But this takes quite a lot of practice to correct in your own mind. So, really think about this. You might want to take some time to just pause and look at this sentence now. But think about the ramifications of this in terms of your own work. Okay, so here are some more examples. Governments made mistakes before and during the crisis. We've looked at that one. So, how do we correct this? Governments made mistakes before and during the crisis, such as the cryonism and inconsistent policies in dealing with the crisis. So you can see that it's just changing the full stop to a comma here. So distance students, what I'm going to ask you to do is to correct the following here. So again, please feel free to talk about these on discussion boards because this is a really key part of your writing to get right. No matter which degree you go into, you're going to need this information. So good to pause now and ask questions while you can. So a little intro to referencing. What is referencing? Why do we do it? When do we do it? How do we do it? So referencing is a system that allows you to acknowledge the sources of information you use in your writing. If you do not reference your sources, you are plagiarizing. So to plagiarize is to rip off someone else's work as your own, basically. So that we don't get it. Why do we do it? So that we don't get accused of plagiarism and so that people reading our work can find the sources that we use. For instance, they might find them useful to follow up on their research. Now, this is a really key part of it because in years to come, when someone is reading your work and you are doing some original research into a particular area, someone else might actually want to get help through the thing that you've written. So if you're referencing, all of this different information that you found on the solar system, on wombats, on, whatever it is that you're researching, then other people will want to follow that thread and understand a bit of what discussions are going on regarding that research. So it's really important to set it up because you will be helping people in the future as well. So when do we reference? You must provide a reference whenever you quote, paraphrase, or summarize someone else's ideas, theories, or data. You must also reference any graphic information you use. Some of the sources you will need to reference include books or chapters in books, journal or newspaper articles, and conference papers. You'll also need to reference films, television programs, personal communications like emails, electronic sources such as web pages, journal articles from online databases, or use net groups. So how do we reference? It depends on the referencing system you have to follow. So remember when you go into your degree, just find out what that referencing system is. We're looking at the Harvard referencing system, and that requires in-text references and a list of references at the end of your work. So for the Harvard system, have a look at the unit outline on page 16, or you can go to the link here, or the print-friendly version is on the website above. So for today, go over your notes from the lecture because there's quite a lot in it. So make sure that you've got everything that you need. Work on your assessment task 2. It's due by Friday, 6th of September. Keep up to date. Please see messages on Milo for UPP025 and check your UTAS email. Look at your essay 1 feedback and think about how you can use it to improve in your second essay. That's a really key part of what you're doing, so don't forget to do that. The mid-semester break is on Monday the 2nd of September. Classes resume on Monday the 9th of September. And what is the mid-semester break? It's a non-teaching week. So it means that there's no lectures or tutorials, but it's a good opportunity for you to work on your assignments and to catch up on your study. So week 8 commences on the 9th of September.